Fredericton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm thankful to once again speak to Bill C-3, an act to amend the Judges Act and the Criminal Code regarding training for judges in sexual assault. At first reading, we heard amazing speeches from engaged and passionate parliamentarians across party lines. I agree with the Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader in his remarks this afternoon that these rounds of debate demonstrate a level of cooperation within our minority parliament that I too appreciate and would love to see more of. I would like to use my time today to speak to the opportunity that I had to participate in the Justice and Human Rights Committee in tabling my first amendments as a Member of Parliament. As a member of an unofficial party, my opportunities to get involved in these important matters are both broad and limiting. In a 3-person caucus, I hold 10 critic files and I monitor 10 committees. However, I am not, sorry, I lost my slide. However, I'm a member of an unofficial party. My opportunities to be involved are at the discretion of different members. I'm not a regular face on the Justice and Human Rights Committee. However, I was welcomed and treated with respect, and I wish to formally thank all members for their hospitality. I also wish to thank my incredible team, en particulier mon adjoint parlementaire pour son travail et son...
I'd like to thank my team for their hard work.
I want to celebrate that one of the 4 amendments that I tabled was accepted. I sincerely appreciate the support as well as the feedback I received in this venture. More importantly, I am thrilled for what this amendment means for Canadians, for women, for victims of sexual assault, and as a meaningful step towards reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada. I tabled 3 other amendments that echoed those put forward by my Liberal and NDP colleagues. I joined in their concern for adequately clarifying social context, as it can and does include a variety of subjects. My team and I listen to organizations and advocates and consider it essential to understand the intersection of systemic oppression and gender identity and the dynamic it plays in the perpetuation of sexual violence. I was alone, however, in addressing the need to include Indigenous voices in the development of the training seminars and in recognizing the impact on Indigenous peoples due to the failures within the justice system. My amendment to Section 60, subsection 3 of the Act, as detailed by Bill C-3, ensures that Indigenous leaders and representatives of Indigenous communities will be included in consultations to develop seminars for judges related to sexual assault law. With this in place, seminars on matters related to sexual assault law will be developed after consultation with Indigenous leaders and representatives of Indigenous communities. It enshrines Indigenous leadership up front, not consultation after the fact, as we have seen time and time again. It embeds meaningful recognition that Indigenous women and girls face rates of sexual assault 3 times higher than for non-Indigenous Canadians. We cannot continue to ignore the prevalence of sexual violence and its impacts on Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit women. I believe that this is essential and that this section explicitly mentions the need for involvement of Indigenous leaders and representatives in the development of these seminars. This amendment is consistent with the spirit of the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and it represents a significant act with respect to the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. I will celebrate this win, but with a commitment to continue to push from all angles, ways to ensure that the dignity and rights of Indigenous peoples are upheld in this country. I will say that I received interesting comments about this amendment that suggested it was perceived as too complicated to explicitly highlight Indigenous peoples in this bill, as it is a slippery slope to begin to name different groups, as I quote. I was taken aback by this, especially considering that same week that we debated in this House a bill that would have Indigenous peoples recognized in our citizenship oath, distinctly recognized as the first peoples of this land, as a critical step on our path towards reconciliation. Therefore, I reject the notion of a slippery slope to include Indigenous leaders and representatives in this amendment. It is never my intention to exclude when highlighting Indigenous peoples, rather the opposite. Within the worldview that I was taught is an inclusion of all life and all peoples, including Two-Spirited, including Black Canadians, and other peoples of color. Additionally, this amendment was never outside the realm of possibility, as its intent was included in the Way Forward, the RCMP Sexual Assault Review and Victim Support Action Plan, where the RCMP outlined their commitment to the development of a sexual assault training curriculum, including mandatory education about the history of colonialism and racism in Canada, the role of racism and sexual assault myths and misconceptions, and that this training be developed in consultation with frontline workers, survivors, and organizations that reflect a diversity of backgrounds, including Black and Indigenous women, girls, trans, and non-binary people. I would go even further to suggest that if we include Indigenous leadership and representatives at all levels of government and in all sectors in Canada, we will all be the better for it. I wish to end tonight with my condolences and my love and prayers for the family of Chantel Moore, who are dealing with yet another immeasurable loss while awaiting the report from the inquest into her death. We cannot take these issues lightly. We cannot ignore that as conversations about consent and violence against women have evolved generationally, so too have conversations around systemic racism. As we empower today's bench with the education that they need to assess questions of consent and rape, so too must we empower them with an understanding of systemic racism and the way those issues intersect. By passing Bill C-3, we tell the women of Canada, including Indigenous women, that they matter, that we believe them, and that we will be doing everything within our power to ensure justice for crimes against them, and that no longer will a biased judgment from an uneducated judge prevent this from happening. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions et commentaires. Questions and comments? L'honorable député Jonquière.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I listened closely to my colleague's speech. I think here in this House, we all agree that this bill should go forward. So in order just to continue the debate, I know that in Quebec, there have been discussions of a tribunal for sexual crimes due to an initiative, of Véronique Yvon's initiative, and I would like to ask my colleague what she thinks of this idea of a special tribunal for sexual crimes. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Fredericton.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for that important question.
An excellent idea, and I think that works very well, for Quebecers, and I would be very interested to see that in other jurisdictions as well. So perhaps we could draw a little bit from their lead and use this model in other places. But for now, I think Bill C-3 and what we're working on today in Parliament is something to be very proud of as Canadians. But certainly there's more work to be done, and I don't think there's anything bad with further investigations into these kinds of issues. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland-Colchester.
Thank you, Madam President, and I want to thank my honourable colleague for, again, her incredible speech, and I have to say I agree wholeheartedly, and I want to thank her for bringing this issue forward and including it in this important bill. I would say, aren't we getting tired of trying to explain to people what systemic racism is? And people should just accept the fact that it is there, that sometimes it's unconscious. That's why it's systemic. And that we need to now move forward and just accept that racism, in fact, does exist and it is systemic. And when it comes to women, it just adds on another layer of troubles to get through to try and make our voices heard and to have the justice and dignity that we deserve. What would my honourable colleague say to that?
Member for Fredericton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for her question and for her kind words. I know that we both care deeply about these issues. Absolutely, I am frustrated in having to kind of defend what systemic racism is or define it for individuals who refuse to accept it. And it's something I see on social media a lot. Anytime we put something out about this kind of issue, people will say, this is an American issue. It's not something that's happening in Canada. Stop bringing this up. It's making it an issue. And that is just, it's ignoring the fact that we all have exactly. It is. We have responsibility not only to acknowledge it, but to do something about it. So I think to get bogged down in a debate about whether it exists or not is just ridiculous, and actually it's a waste of our time. So I'm thankful that we're seeing more and more people come out and outright acknowledge and understand what it is. But still, that work is there for the actions behind eradicating it. So thank you once again for drawing attention to that.
Thank you.
The Honourable Member for. Sorry, for Nanaimo Lady Smith.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to congratulate the Honourable Member from Fredericton for her speech and thank her for her tireless advocacy on these issues of discrimination and systemic discrimination and seeing it for what it is and understanding it. That cultural safety and cultural competency are something that all professionals need to learn in every profession. And I think that that the amendments that the Honourable Member has put forward to this bill are valuable. And I'm pleased to see that the committee has supported them and they're included in the bill. I don't have a question in particular. I just wanted to thank the honourable member for her work, and if she'd like to comment further on some of the ideas that she has on how we can better train all professionals in this country to understand systemic racism, I'd appreciate that.
Honourable member for Fredericton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague from Nanaimo, Ladysmith. Before I came to the House of Commons, my work was in education, and I worked in anti-racism education and in indigenizing curriculum within our public spaces and in our schools, and that work will continue. I'm so honored to have the opportunity to do it from this vantage point, but this is a commitment that I've made a long time ago, and I do believe that education is the key to eradicating systemic racism in our communities, and we all need to call out the overt racism that we're also seeing. So there's many layers to this, but it takes all of us. And I just thank you for that comment and the question.